Kia ora, I'm Anne. I'm trying to learn my Maori while I'm here and feel very fortunate, very privileged to be invited to speak to all of you today. You never want to be the person that has to follow Peter Kudenchuk. That's one of our side mantras at the Resuscitation Academy. I know there are questions for Peter, there always are. So what I can offer you is that we have a condensed version of Peter's talk on the Resuscitation Academy website that you can review for those of you medical directors that want to share this with others. It's there, it's free for the taking. Just have to put in your email address and tell us who you are, and you can take that. But for those that are a little more like me and you thought, wait, what? I have questions, you can go back and watch it as many times as you like. So. All right, great. So I'm here to talk a little bit about two activities, the Global Resuscitation Alliance, which Freddie talked about yesterday, and the Resuscitation Academy, which started all of this business. But first, I'd just like to say that in 2014, the Seattle American football team won the Super Bowl, which is a huge deal because we're normally not winners in that category. So that was January 2014. And in February 2014, the city threw a huge party. We had to celebrate, and I will draw your attention to this sign, Station 10. So that's one of the fire stations in the heart of downtown Seattle. 700,000 people were estimated to come out to celebrate with all of us on this very cold day. And the players drove around on those duck buses. We had a great day. It was a great day for most, but it was not a great day for one patient who suffered a cardiac arrest during the Seahawks parade. So this was Heather Kelly. Heather Kelly was 47 years old. She had her two daughters, got to miss school for this special occasion, and on the way to the parade, that was Heather's medic unit that you saw previously that took 20 minutes to get to her. But fortunately for Heather, we have a little saying that Seattle is a great place to have a cardiac arrest. It is a terrible place to faint. So it was actually Heather's daughters who called 911 and who started CPR. The older daughter had just had CPR teaching in school a few months ago. And so Heather today, and like many patients around her, are our North Star. They are the center of everything we do. And I think, like all of you, I've heard so many times in the last couple of days, when we bring it back to the patient, invariably we make the right decisions. And so with that, I'd like to launch. So here we are in lovely New Zealand, amazing scenery. I'm headed out on holiday tomorrow. I'm so excited. Amazing scenery, rich culture. It was on my bucket list to see a haka live and in person, so thank you, David. That's 2 hakas in one day yesterday, and then I'll be off to see the All Blacks play next Saturday as well. But there are 5 cardiac arrests per day in New Zealand, and there's about 1 person who survives out of that 5. And so the leadership here recognizes that we can do better, that we can all do better. So they are very much a part of the Global Resuscitation Alliance. This is a photo from our last meeting, which was in the spring in Copenhagen. We have leaders, as Freddie mentioned, from Australia, New Zealand, North America, Asia, and Europe. And we're a band of people who are committed and dedicated to improving cardiac arrest survival around the world. One of my favorite things about this group is that it is very much led from a humble place of we can do better, and we have to do better for Heather and all of our patients. So what does that mean? We need to make these things actionable. There was a great recognition that we needed steps, we needed directions, we needed to know where to start. We have a great deal of science and published literature. And as I like to say, I'm not a physician, because you're wondering, who is this lady? I send emails, I'm an organizer person. But there's a lot of academic literature on the shelves and libraries, and it's all very, very important. Data is at the very bedrock of everything that we do. But what we'd like to start sharing is how you take those journals off of the shelves and those protocols off of the shelves, and you open them up on your work tables and you start to talk about how do we take this science and bring it into practice. That's what we're calling implementation. So Mickey Eisenberg has come up with what he likes to call the 10 programs. He has 10 fingers, like most of us do, and so he's very big on 10. And the first and most important is having a cardiac arrest registry, which I'll talk about just a little bit in a few minutes. But you have to start by collecting and measuring your data. That's the bedrock, that's the foundation. Another thing to commit to is rapid dispatch. That idea that as soon as it's obvious that help is needed, that help is sent. So this also applies, of course, to stroke and trauma, but around cardiac arrest, we can sort out the details later. But if a patient is not conscious and not breathing normally, that patient needs help regardless. So hit the dispatch button straight away. Telephone CPR program, so training telecommunicators on a regular basis, not just once a year or not just once when they are initially trained, but giving them ongoing training on how to manage these rare but often difficult and critical calls. Collecting the data on how they handle those calls, scoring them, and giving them feedback. Absolutely essential. High performance CPR, so building on the information that you just received from Peter, what can your teams do to reduce pauses in CPR on scene? Sometimes it's very little, it's small things. It's talking about who's going to put on the defibrillator, who's going to start chest compressions, how do you work together as a team, is your scene quiet, all those sorts of things. So is Dan Rose here? Or Tony Smith. Anybody see Dan or Tony or Karen? Of course, last minute, like the good medic that he is. Or Karen Stewart. Anyway, there's been several among this group that have come up to the Resuscitation Academy who I now consider experts. So feel free to ask them more about that. In Seattle and King County, we activate the voice recording on our defibrillators so that we can hear what's happening on scene, which gives us great insight into why sometimes there are long pauses or very short pauses. You can hear the dog barking in the background, attacking one of your medics, and it gives us extra information. But even if you don't have that, the importance of downloading that data, getting information from the scene, and using that data from the machines is very helpful. And of course, if you have AED programs, I've heard a lot of great conversations about getting AED programs for first responders, whether that means the fire brigade or police or lifeguards, any of your professional responders. That you use smart technologies like the Good Sam app to activate your citizen response. I appreciate that CPR training is not mandatory in schools everywhere, but working towards that, and I'll tell a story in a couple slides about how the Brits did really well in that area. That you work towards accountability, and by accountability we mean that when you collect your data that you share that data with your residents, with your municipal or state leaders, and you're transparent. Right? We all have room to improve. And finally, the culture of excellence. So last night I had a very inspiring discussion with Karen Stewart. She's an operations manager with St. John, and she and Dan Rose and a few small group of their leaders are going to be going out into their stations every other day to explain in a nutshell Peter's science of CPR and why they're working to reduce pauses in their CPR evolutions. That is culture of excellence. That is a big commitment. And I believe the Maori word that I've done, picked up another one for that is aroha. That's that. So you can change it and make this the aroha version. Okay. So with all of those 10 programs, measure and improve. You all work so hard in your jobs. You all show so much dedication. That dedication deserves to be recognized through measuring. It's not worth doing hard work if you're not going to measure it and then build upon it. So measure and improve everything you do. On your seats is a publication that came out of the Global Resuscitation Alliance. These are the most wonderful thing, aside from summarizing the 10 steps, is that we're starting to collect stories of implementation. Stories of agencies that have taken all of the 10 steps and actually implemented them in their own neck of the woods. And that's what's inspiring for us. We very much appreciate that if you've seen one EMS system, you've seen one EMS system. Good for you. Your problems are not like my problems. I have my own problems, right? And we all do. So just to give you 3 quick examples that are some of my favorites. So our friends in Singapore have many things squared away in their communities, but they had a very low cardiac arrest survival, so just 3% overall survival with a 20% bystander CPR rate. And so Dr. Marcus Ong and YY Ng decided they would do something about that, and they would implement a rigorous TCPR program. So talking to telecommunicators about the importance of starting instructions early. And then the thing that blows me away that they did, which is much the same as Karen and her group at St. John's, is that after the telecommunicators got off shift, they went and had a brief meeting and reviewed any of the cardiac arrests that happened on that shift before they got to go home for the day. Those are the types of things you get to do in Singapore, right? It's run by the military, so you get to do that. But they doubled their bystander CPR rate, and their ROSC rate jumped to 6%. So very powerful. Bystander CPR improvements in Britain. So school training is not mandatory, as many of you probably know, but the British Heart Foundation took it upon themselves as one of their main initiatives to try and improve that. So they took their call push rescue kits, they paired those with DVDs in classrooms, and this blows me away, in 16,000 students trained in 10 days. And they do an excellent job of collecting their records, and we're able to trace back that 11 lives were saved because of kids that had received that training and activated the system early. So look at that, over these 3 years, they've trained 2 million school children with a goal of training 5 million total by the year 2020. It's very impressive. But what I like here is that they've engaged their their national nonprofit to help them find a way to get CPR into schools. And then this was one of Mickey Eisenberg's favorite stories to read when the suggestions came in. So the cardiac arrest registry work that was done in South Australia, they realized that they absolutely needed to be collecting cardiac arrest data. We call it a low-hanging fruit, but they told us, no, that was not a low-hanging fruit for us. Is there anyone here in the room from South Australia? No? Or shy? Oh, there you guys are. Very good. So this was fantastic. They did an entire review of how their data was collected, probably looked for holes and areas to improve, and what went well, and then reviewed the data itself, and have worked exceptionally hard on cultivating the relationship skills, because so much of this is building relationships and then leveraging those relationships across time, which takes care and feeding to make this a durable process. So our hats are off to you, and we send a big gold star from Mickey. So the Resuscitation Academy has been at this for the last 10 years, and we started with, we actually started with 4 people in one class because we weren't sure this was a good idea. But I think it's turned out to be a pretty good idea. As you can see, we've expanded quite a bit. And then it's always fun to look at a map, right? And so there we are up in Washington here. And there have been Resuscitation Academy events cropping up around the United States and around the globe. One of the things that you would be told if you were to come to Seattle at the end of 2 days, people say, what can I do? And well, you can measure and improve. You can take on a project. You should start small. It's easy to get big eyes and say, I want to do everything. I'm so excited. But I will say you should hold a Resuscitation Academy in your own neck of the woods, right? Start these conversations of leadership. Help each other, support each other, which is what we did earlier in the week with the group. So what's next for the RA? We're continuing to grow and strengthen our leadership group, the group that meets about once a year through the Global Resuscitation Alliance. We're working on disseminating the 10 programs. We're collecting, the lines are open. So if you've got a great story to tell about how you've implemented one of the 10 programs, absolutely, please send it to Helen and David or Tony, because we need to tell these stories. Beyond just telling the stories and handing out the gold stars for work well deserved, it's so powerful for others to see what is happening in different corners of the world, because what I find is that I'll find that, say Karen's done something really well in Ambulance Victoria, but this is something that Freddie Lippert's been struggling with for a couple of years. And so what we're doing here is we're starting to connect the dots around the world as we work towards improving the implementation of these programs. We'll continue to have Resuscitation Academy and GRA events, and we're working on programs. 2 programs around high-performance CPR and one around TCPR with our partners at Laerdal Medical and American Heart Association to make this journey a little bit easier for you. So in both scenarios, we employ low-dose, high-frequency learning. So a crew in an EMS station or a dispatcher in the comm center would sit down and just go through a 10-minute refresher online, right? And just get a little bit of education, just as they can fit it in. And then move to a scenario where they're scored on how they handle a cardiac arrest call or how they handle a CPR evolution. And then immediately get feedback on how they did, right? I think the literature is very clear on that. That's what will help reinforce adult learners towards making lasting improvements in the care that they provide over the phone or on scene. And so we're so pleased to be able to be working with these guys. I feel like we're on jet fuel, having them at our backs. So here's the picture you've already seen, but you're probably thinking, where are my familiar faces? Well, there they are. Those are your leaders. They're your glue for the GRA, and we're so pleased to have all of you following us along. So Helen's in the middle. If anybody hasn't put a face to a name with Helen, I know everybody knows Dave and Tony. Your famous faces, but that's Helen, and she's been fantastic. So the goal, hopefully the next time I come back, will be that everyone has a better chance at surviving cardiac arrest down under. How about that? I finished on time, Greg.